When you look at Jewish history in New Mexico, there are the old German Jewish immigrants that came in the 1800s. We know the names: the Spiegelbergs, the Staubs, the Ilfelds, the Nordhauses, etc.
The original Jewish community in Santa Fe in the 1850s was composed basically of German Jewish merchants who had arrived here. They set up businesses on the plaza. They assimilated into the local community. And interestingly enough, they did not establish a synagogue or buy land for a cemetery, which was common for immigrant Jewish communities. But they did hold services in their homes, and burials were made in the Fairview Cemetery, along with Masons and Longfellows and others, which was the only non-Catholic cemetery in the city. And we're standing here next to the Staub compound in this cemetery, and you can see the main stone here, which is for Abraham Staub. His wife Julia and other members of the family are buried here also. Another important burial here is Arthur Seligman. He was the only Jewish governor of New Mexico, and he is buried here alongside his wife, Franz. The graves in the cemetery give us a little bit of an idea of the early Jewish community in Santa Fe and the role of these merchants in the life of the city. In the 1960s and 70s, Jewish burials shifted to a new cemetery, and the last of the Jewish merchants, like the Bells and the Kahns, are buried here.
When I was a kid, I would say 80% of the businesses downtown were operated by Jewish people. You had the Spitzes, and you had the Ganses, and the Booms, the Kahns, the Bells, you know. And
Teicherts.
what little training I got was from Leah Bell, you know, the pillar of the Jewish community.
That was my aunt.
She was a whack from Bruns Hospital, but she came from somewhere else, and that was his aunt.
Yeah.
And between her and Marion, what little education we got came from those two, but Leah was kind of the leader of that group.
So as a whole, when you look at Santa Fe and all the Jewish merchants that you mentioned, do you think overall they were accepted and respected? What are your thoughts on all of the merchants and the community members that were Jewish?
The only show in town. They were respected. They were leaders in town, and whenever they had celebrations at the La Fonda Hotel, you know, the Jewish community was there.
Most of the stores downtown Santa Fe were owned by Jewish merchants, and on Yom Kippur, they were closed. And I think a lot of people found that interesting. They would go shopping, and these stores would be closed.
The first in my family was Abraham Staub, who was my great-grandfather. There are lots of stories about Abraham, and I'm very lucky because I grew up with stories in my family. And Abraham was very successful and set up in Santa Fe on the plaza where there were other German Jewish merchants. Later on, when he became more successful, he went back to Germany, brought back his bride, whose name was Julia Schuster Staub, and lived in a place called Burrow Alley, which is still in Santa Fe. Abraham had always promised Julia he would build her a house like she had had or they had had in Germany. And he did on Palace Avenue. So they moved from Burrow Alley to Palace Avenue to what is now called La Posada Resort and Inn.
Over the entrance to the cathedral there is a triangle with the Hebrew words for God, Yud-He, Vav-He.
Archbishop Lamy, on Saturday night, he would go over to where there was a poker game. And he was very glum one night, and our great-grandfather Abraham asked, "What is the matter?" He said, "I don't think we'll be able to finish the cathedral, and I can't pay you back for what you have lent to the project." Staub said, I'll get the loan or I'll write you the check, whatever it was, if you put something over the cathedral. And that is the triangle tetragrammaton, the Hebrew writing for God.
My grandparents came to Albuquerque in 1905 to work with my grandfather's relatives, the Rosenwald brothers. And then they came to Santa Fe and opened up a department store, which is quite remarkable when you think of how it must have been then. Anyway, it was a very small town. And she bought this building from the Catrins in 1927.
What I remember about my great-grandmother, Johanna, she's really the matriarch of our Santa Fe family. Johanna was the one who really managed the store. I mean, she kept it alive after her first husband died. And she was an incredible businesswoman. There's things in the archives that showed that she had run the business, and as soon as her husband had died, they weren't going to give her a loan. There was some letters that said that the bank wouldn't give her a loan because she was a woman. That's why she went back to New York to find a man to help her run the store, and ultimately married him. But she was really the business person behind it all. She was incredible. Tough lady. Loved her.
See, I'm a first generation American here.
Generation American. So where were
They
your
came
parents
from Austria and Hungary, and my mother came from Germany. So I'm a first generation.
Why Santa Fe?
Huh?
Why Santa Fe?
Well, that's part of the migration. You know, one of the older brother came out here and got in the business and needed some help, and there was two other brothers that lived in the United States. So he brought them out, one being my father, one being Leo, and then a third brother, Marcel. So there were 4 brothers out here. Now they had 9 in the family. 3 of them got murdered in Europe during concentration camps. So not all of them got here. And so they had 1 sister in New York and the 4 brothers here. The rest never got out of Europe. So you know about that stuff.
Yeah.
My dad worked at different places. They bought a store from Weiler and Benjamin about 1909. They used to go back to New York, and that's where they met Henry Pick and brought him out here. Henry liked working for him, was drafted in the Army during World War, came back here, and a brother of his, Emil, came out from New York. My dad went to Gallup in about 1910 or 11 and started a store there. Married my mother in 1914, and she came to Gallup from a little town in Germany, and Gallup was a wide open place. But there was Gallup, there were the Indians, there was miners, there were cowboys, you name it.
Then there's the second and third generation, and my family, I guess, would be the second generation of immigrants. And my paternal grandparents, who came into New Mexico first as peddlers, right around after New Mexico became a state around 1914.
From where?
Out of Colorado. But before they got to Colorado, my grandfather Morris, who was Moshe Belitzer, Morris Bell, he shortened his name when they came into this country, came from Lithuania.
What kind of like peddling, or what kind of products? Or
They were selling clothing, notions, wares, pots, pans, a little bit of everything.
When my mother and father were married in 1921, my father opened up the shoe store, which was right next door to my grandmother's store, and he called the shoe store the Guarantee. And then Abe and I and my brother ran the store after we were married.
So these are my grandparents. So Barney Pacheski and Pauline Pacheski. Pauline was the daughter of Hannah, and she loved Santa Fe. Worked in the store all of her life. Barney was born on Delancey Street in New York, and his family was in the furrier business. And then my grandmother met him the Jewish women brought Jewish men back to Santa Fe and worked at the store. And that's how Babu or Barney got here. But my grandmother, Pauline, or who we called Mama, I always considered her the Grand Dame of Santa Fe. People loved to come up to her, take her out. She was out all the time, almost to the time that she died. She was always greeting people, loving people, always would be in the store even if she wasn't working there anymore.
Emil was my father. Marcel was his younger brother, and they were partners in the laundry business. But it goes back even earlier than that. We have an interesting background. Henry Pick was the older brother. He brought my dad out, he brought Marcel out, and Leo. And he had a general store in Lamy, New Mexico. And ultimately, he bought another store in Torero called the Henry Pick Stores. They had a mine up there where the Pecos River was. And when the mines closed, that store closed. But in between that time, in about 1932, Henry Pick was bringing the payroll back from Santa Fe to Pecos to pay his employees, and he stopped by the side of the road and was murdered.
Yeah.
And they never found out who did it. Well, subsequently to that, my dad married his widow. They did that in the Jewish religion many years ago.
I have a copy of the original minutes of the Santa Fe Jewish Temple in 1946.
See, I was
It
10
says right
years
there.
old.
Well, it says Emil Pick.
Emil had the money. Emil was a businessman. Emil brought the cons in from Gallup. You know, put them in the. He put them in the cons. He put them in the shoe store.
We came here in 1935 and started a shoe store. My dad went to see Henry Pick, who had whom they had brought out from New York. We had helped the Picks get started, and they had a mine store up at Torero, and made a lot of money out of it. Henry Pick was killed in a holdup, taking a payroll up the Pecos to Torero, and Emil Pick, his brother, took his place. So my dad saw Emil, and Emil knew all about it. Says, "Go ahead, Gus." So we started the store, and we've been here ever since.
My grandmother loved to play poker, and that Saturday night, their friends would get together, and then my grandmother went to New York to shop, and sometimes she'd be gone for a month. It was such a small town that you couldn't have more than one dress alike, even if it cost $2.98. There was a story she told about a judge's wife. Her name was Mrs. Wright. And one day she was walking by the store, and she saw a dress in the window, and she came in and she said, "Mrs. Blatt, you'll have to send that dress back. I just bought one just like it in El Paso."
Across the street is the La Fonda Hotel, and there were some houses along here. Mrs. Kisov said she was born in one of those houses. She is long since dead, but the La Fonda now belongs to Sam Ballin.
Actually, no, it's on Grand Avenue.
I guess everybody is just about here, but across the street where it says Bear Trading, Mrs. Blatt had a ladies ready-to-wear shop when we came here called Blatt Incorporated. Right next to that is what used to be the Capital Pharmacy that was owned by Louis Gardetsky, and he did very well. It was quite an establishment, and Louis was well known.
We can just look around. We remember when we'd come to Capital Pharmacy, and the people that owned Capital Pharmacy, it was so interesting because we could sit in there. We didn't have a lot of money. You could sit in there and nurse a Coke all afternoon long. They wouldn't tell you to beat it. You try that now, and they'll tell you hit the road. You're taking up for space. And then the Bells, naturally, they had a store here. I worked there for a while. Angie's aunt worked there.
At that time, there was no temple, no formal Jewish religious life. There were about 10 Jewish families who made up the community. Names like Gans, Livingston, Teichert, Kahn, Kempenek, Bell, Pick, and my family, the Blatts and the Pacheskis. The families held services in their homes, but not on a regular basis. My father, who had grown up in New York, often led the services.
He was a cantor, trained cantor. He did most of the services that were out at the Brums Hospital because there wasn't a rabbi available. And before we had the temple, he led most of the services in families' homes.
When someone died, it was difficult to find a minyan to say Kaddish.
And when I was growing up Jewish, we weren't really Jewish. You know, we didn't have a rabbi. I don't know if you've been told, but at that time, the most learned person we had was Barney Pacheski.
Yeah.
You've heard that name, and you probably know
Marion's
about
dad.
that.
Yeah.
Marion's dad. And so they had the Friday night services in his living room, and he did the talking and all that. And the only thing we kids cared about was the wine, you know. The Kiddush, you know, at the end of the thing, we drank that Mogan David wine. I loved that, and that's about all I remember. So the generation of us, my generation, were not Jewish. You know, I practiced being a Jew for a while here in Santa Fe. Well, I went to Temple, and I got to be a vice president of the board of directors of Temple Beth Shalom. Well, it was probably been in the late 60s, early 70s. I can't remember. What the funny story was, is we had a 13-person board of directors. And Neil Goldberg, have you ever heard that name? He was our doctor here. And he was our president. And he apparently was not used to 13 Jews with 13 opinions. He couldn't handle the meetings. So one Saturday, he says, "The hell with this." He walked out. I ended up being the president, and I didn't even know how to spell Jew. You know, I'm sitting up there, say, "What the hell is this all about?" I never learned Hebrew or anything else, but I did it for my dad.
My mother and some other women started a Saturday school. Some of the older boys were Sam and Henry Pick, and then Rabbi Shur from Albuquerque would come up once a month to help start learning Hebrew.
I want to say this, that my grandparents, all of my grandparents, were very proud of their Judaism, and although they changed their names, they were all cut from a very Orthodox families in the old country.
Sure.
But when they came to the United States, they looked to assimilate like a lot of people.
Despite the lack of formal education, I always had a deep sense of my own religion. I used to laughingly tell my folks that I had to fight for my religion. Later, the rabbis from Albuquerque came up about twice a month, and I was confirmed at Temple Albert. Then I taught religious school, along with other members of the community, in the basement of the Baptist church.
So when you talk about that, a lot of the Jewish story in the press is about Israel. Did your father and you yourself in 1948, when Israel became a state,
Pro-Israel.
So did that ever come in Santa Fe?
It got that 6-day war.
Yeah.
Albuquerque raised $1 million in 1 week for that war. That was a congregation down in Albuquerque. My dad contributed to that.
Wow.
Strong as Israel people now, not so much anymore. You know, there's differences of opinion. You know.
Yeah, definitely.
But in those days, it was pro-Israel.
Santa Fe didn't have Jewish houses of worship. It was always done at people's homes. So there were, and you know the story, it could have been the Silvers or the Pacheski family. Well, Pacheski and the Blatt family, a lot of the old Jewish families were observing holidays at homes. And my father and my dad's brother, his name was Gerald Bell, they were bar mitzvahed in their house on Don Gaspar Avenue. They were very involved in the beginnings of Santa Fe Jewish Center, which became Temple Beth Shalom.
When we returned to Santa Fe in 1952, the cornerstone was laid for the temple that we now know as the Upper Sanctuary. Well, it was the first Jewish temple in Santa Fe. And it was designed by John Gaumeme, and it would hold 100 people. And we thought that that would be as big as we'd ever need. We were finally able to hire an almost full-time rabbi, and that was Rabbi Leonard Hellman. And soon we were bursting at the seams, and a drive was started to raise money for a new temple.
And my father, my uncle, and my aunt were all presidents of Temple Beth Shalom. My dad, Irving, my dad's brother, Gerald, my Aunt Leah. When my dad's brother passed away, she married Arden Kellogg, and was mostly known in Santa Fe as Leah Kellogg.
I taught at the temple. I taught the little kids, like they're. In fact, I taught Sam Pick and Henry Pick.
The generation that I grew up in, the Spitzes, with me, and we weren't religious because we didn't know anything about it. We had no temple, nobody here, no leadership, you know, and it was just a few of the people that were born in Europe that wanted to hold it together. You know, Leo Pick here, he never saw the inside of the temple, you know, and he was one of the brothers, and the Spitz people never went inside the temple. I never.
Well, what about back in Germany or Europe?
They got through. They were out of there when they were 15, 16 years old.
I wonder if they had
their dad sent them out here when he knew there was trouble out there.
Yeah.
He sent, and not all of them got out. But the ones that got out, Marcel was the most religious of all of them. He was the younger brother, and he was the one that was very active in the Anti-Defamation League and got awards for that. Jewish people are part of the community.
Sure.
And you got to understand other people's positions. It wasn't just cloistered. They didn't just deal with their own.
Yeah.
They dealt out in the community. All my brother, my dad could speak Spanish. Marcel could speak Spanish. You know, their friends were Greeks. You know, they knew all the restaurateurs, but they liked their religion. My dad liked to go to temple on Friday night.
So the men did B'nai B'rith. There was a B'nai B'rith lodge here in Santa Fe. The women obviously were very big with Hadassah, and almost all my family, my grandmother and my aunt, and were presidents of Hadassah. My mom was a member of Hadassah here in Santa Fe.
Santa Fe was truly a utopia in many ways, where there was no prejudice, and it never seemed to matter what you had, but who you were and what you had to offer as an individual.
And I've been discriminated against, and I still tell people I'm Jewish. I remember going to the University of New Mexico when I came from New Mexico Military Institute to go to junior in UNM. I pledged a fraternity, the Phi Delta Theta fraternity, and they wanted me in there, and then I put on the card, Jewish. And damn, if Jerry Apodaca, the ex-governor, was a member then, we just had a funeral for him last week. He pulls me out and he says, "Man, I'm sorry, the charter doesn't let Jews in there."
Oh my God.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, that happened in 55, 56.
No.
And so they...
What did you feel?
Well, I felt badly at that, you know, first time I had been discriminated against. But they changed that charter as a result of me not being allowed to go in there.
So overall, that never was an issue, being a Jewish mayor.
No.
It was just...
People were accepted. When I was a state Democratic chairman, the person who got the largest percentage of votes was a black guy, Tom, who won as the state auditor down in Albuquerque. New Mexico is a very open state. They're not as racist as...
No.
I think it's worse now than it ever was.
Yeah.
But not when I was growing up.
It's a very special place. You know, the city different. I guess we all fit in a different way.
Our building was owned by Julius Gans, who came out here after World War I and went in business over here where part of Packard's is. And one of the Spiegelbergs, Willie Spiegelberg, was a big help to him. And his business grew, so he moved across the street. And in 1921 or 22, he bought that building for either 17 or 19,000 bucks, which, as I've said before, was a lot of money. And next to him, that was Spetz's jewelry store, And Solomon Spitz started that business. It was a jewelry store along about 1875, 1876, 78. I'm not exactly sure.
And right next door to the Gans building was the Spitz jewelry store, and they were very successful jewelers, had a wonderful store. They were the only place in town that you could get fine china, fine jewelry, silverware, wedding presents, and they had a clock in front of their store, and they have donated that to the city. It's the clock that's over there in front of the Fine Arts Museum.
When you were mayor, what other exciting things happened? Like any interesting, like Prince Charles, I remember he came to Santa Fe.
Dalai Lama came to Santa Fe. You know, I have
So
a picture with him and the Dalai Lama, a very materialistic kind of a guy. He brought his entourage with him. They showed up with so many bags of crap they bought around here. Yeah, we're all the same. He's a very nice guy, you know. But I traveled around the country promoting a cologne called the Santa Fe cologne.
I remember that cologne.
And I went to New York City when they released the cologne, and I'd had 3 or 4 drinks. Now, it was really funny that day when I talked. So they fired the group that they were going to have to travel around the country, and they hired me. And I was the mayor, and I said, what the hell am I going to get about that? He said, well, we'll give you $25,000 and fly you around the country to promote the Santa Fe cologne. And I said, well, I'll do that, but I took the $25,000, I donated it to the Fiesta Councils. He being Jewish, gave it to the Catholics to start the Fiesta Foundation.
But you did very good for Santa Fe.
I did. I built it up a lot. No, I think I built tourism up a lot, but then I got accused of being a part of the class society, the very rich and the very poor, which I really had nothing to do with. People were going to move here anyway, but so they got tired of me after 10 years. You know, I don't have to run anymore.
You were mayor twice.
Twice, and then I was appointed once. Yeah.
Right across the street here, I'd like to mention where the 5 and 10 dime is. That was Mendel Goodman had a men's store there, MG, and he was one heck of a nice guy. And we'll move down the street a little ways and continue this. That first building, Old Man Solomon had a department store there, but he sold a store to Louis Rosen and Rose Rosen. Louis Rosen used to, if you had a yard site, a memorial time for someone who died, Louis would conduct the yard site. They sold the store along about 1950 to the Schwartzes and Stearns from Las Cruces, and it was known as the Emporium. Where the Santa Fe gifts are, that was Old Man H. Livingston, who was, you can still see the sign there, Livingston's Quality Furniture, H for H. Hyman Livingston, and if he was a terrific gambler, and if you wanted to put some money down on a horse or something, you saw H. Livingston or you saw Arthur Bellhop at the La Fonda. Dan Tykert had a store down the street here, and he took that over with a 5 and 10 cent store and did very well. Bell's had a store someplace along here.
Bell's was a special place, and one of the anchor stores in downtown Santa Fe. And they moved to 116 West San Francisco Street when Charles Ilfeld Company went out of business, another well-known Jewish merchant. And before he was there, it was Z. Staub and Company. And so it was very interesting in that one location. So, but the store was known as a place for Santa Fe's, I would say, middle-class merchants. And we were Santa Fe's Levi Strauss Center. We sold more jeans than anyone in the city. A luggage department. It was like an old-fashioned department store. I did want to say this about my mom. She came from a much larger city, and our store was a very old-fashioned business. And she brought a lot of ideas from the larger department stores from Birmingham that she wanted to see it here in Santa Fe. And it was a really good thing because they brought it up to, the future, so to speak. And you could see we had something for the whole family, whether it was children, men, suits, ladies ready to wear, junior department. This is a good example of one of our ads. That was our logo. Bell's department store opening day, 1926. A lot of the artists in Santa Fe, they paid their bills to the store in paintings. So Dorothy Meringue, Janet Lippincott. There was a famous Japanese artist in Santa Fe. His name was Tumatsu. So they owed money to the store, and they said, "Can we pay our bill on art?" And my dad said, "Sure." Yeah. When we closed the store, I remember to this day, we locked the door for the last time. I put my hand up on the wall and I said goodbye to that building. I was very sad, because I wish my dad would have lived to have seen it himself. Just to close the doors himself. I love this picture of my dad because he's walking down San Francisco Street. You can see the Spitz clock when it used to be on San Francisco Street. Now it's on the other side of the plaza.
Now, we all talk about experiences. I had a lovely customer, and she did a little artwork, got fairly famous, Georgia O'Keeffe. And she came in the store one day and said, "I need some bedroom slippers, and I wear only Daniel Green. I'm sure you ladies know of the brand Daniel Green." I said, "What size, Miss O'Keeffe?" "I wear a 9.5, black, of course." I said, "To heck with this." I ordered 7 different colors, including the black. Called her up, and she came in. And I said, "By the way, they come in all these colors, too." She took 7 pair. So, bless her heart.
Santa Fe was a fun place.
Jews can be happy, believe it or not.
Oh, yeah.
They got a lot of reasons.
All the
to be
good
happy.
comedians.
Damn right. I see ya. See you, sweetheart.
Okay,
I'll
so
put
good
you
to
in
see
my
you.
will.
Okay.
Remember,
Take
don't
care.
step on any bugs.
No.
Thanks, Sam. See you later.
Jewish merchants had a major role in the economic and cultural life of Santa Fe throughout the 20th century. Joanna Blatt opened the White House clothing store in this building in 1912, and the Pacheskis and Silvers had stores there throughout the century. El Pavon was at the end of the block. La Fonda Hotel was next, and Sam and Ethel Ballin made it a cornerstone of Santa Fe's social life in the last half of the century. Ms. Blatt also had a women's clothing store across the street on the corner, and Louis Gardeski's Capital Pharmacy was next to it. Julius Gann's Indian Arts and Crafts store was next, which later became Kahn's shoe store. The building anchoring the middle of the block was the old Spiegelberg building, where the Spiegelbergs and Staubs originally had businesses. They were replaced by Solomon Spitz Jewelry and the Seligman's men's store. Down San Francisco Street was Mendel Goodman's men's store, the Louis and Rose Rosen's Emporium, La Tienda, Irving Bell's department store, Taggart's Five and Dime, Chaim Livingston's Furniture, and Gold's Trading Post, among others. Although the legacy is less visible today, the aura of memory lingers around the plaza for those who lived this golden age of Jewish merchants in Santa Fe.